Well, hello, friends. Thank you for joining me on the Daily Connection, where we're looking at the book of Proverbs. And I'll tell you, it's loaded. It's like every phrase of every verse has something that we just need to stop and contemplate what's being said here and what's the implications of that. But it seems like a theme that resonates all throughout is not just wisdom alone, but how wisdom is going to directly impact our day-to-day activities. Things like how we act, what we say. Those are implied in almost every single verse. And of course, they're set alongside how righteousness will lead us to act and say one thing, whereas unrighteousness, evil is a word that appears many times in CSB, will lead us to say things that are not helpful, not beneficial, leads to do things that are destructive. And so today I want to look at one verse in chapter 10. It's verse 19, and there's some profound truths here that we really need to grab onto. And not just us individually, but our whole culture could really learn a lesson from just these few words. Look at verse 19 of chapter 10. When there are many words, sin is unavoidable, but the one who controls his lips is prudent. Wow, check that out. When you say a lot, you're inevitably going to find yourself in sin. But when you measure words carefully, you restrain yourself, then it says right there, the lip is prudent. Meaning it's very calculated, it's very careful and concise in what it says. And I tell you what, James really grabbed on that, didn't he? You go to in the book of James, and he says everyone should be slow to speak, quick to listen. Excuse me, slow to speak, and it could be translated slower to get angry. And that's it. When we listen, we're quick to listen, when we're carefully focused on listening to a person. And when I'm counseling with couples, listening doesn't just involve what I hear from your auditory speech. It also involves what I'm sensing in your demeanor, your posture. I'm listening to your tone, how you're saying something, voice inflection. Are you saying it with enthusiasm and excitement? Are you saying it with what's obviously discouragement or maybe disappointment? Because we can say certain phrases, and if we say them differently with inflection, then it brings a different meaning. So James was definitely on to something, and I think he was drawing from the writer of Proverbs. Because here it says, when words are many, sin's unavoidable. In other words, when I don't shut up and listen, then inevitably I'm going to do something that's sinful. Whether it's I'm going to sin against God by uttering by making a statement that's in contradiction to His word and in conflict with His character, or I'm going to say something that is an attack against my fellow man and does not show love at all. But he says when words are many, sin is unavoidable. And my goodness, it's like today you listen to somebody doing an interview, or you listen to somebody doing a TikTok video, or somebody's doing some sort of a live feed, and it's just like they won't hush. You're like, my goodness, please hush. The more you talk, the more you're indicting yourself. The more you talk, the less you're arguing, the less sense your argument makes. The more you talk, the less competent you seem. Hush. But that's just the nature of who we are today. It's like we feel like we have to say a lot of different things. And you're probably sitting there, kind of making fun of me a little bit, saying, here's a preacher saying you shouldn't say a lot of things. But hopefully, whenever we speak, especially myself, I'm speaking the truths and the explanations of God's Word, not simply my opinions regarding something. But we see the text clearly indicating that the one who restrains, that shows prudence. It shows great wisdom and calculation and understanding, that oftentimes what needs to be said can be said with brief, just a few words. It can be said with great calculation and careful contemplation. And that's what I think about with James. Not only about the idea of not getting angry, but I think about the idea of when I listen more and I talk less, then it's not just going to benefit you, the one that needs me to hear something correctly. It's going to benefit me, the one who needs to make sure I respond correctly. That I give you the right, word, that God gives me the right words to say in the very moment to say it. And that's what I think about here, because if you keep on going on, he keeps on talking about the tongue, verse 20, lips, verse 20 to 21, comes down again in verse, again in verse 20, 28, 26, 27. It just goes on and on and on, symbolizing how oftentimes what we say is a direct reflection of our character and our nature. And so to withhold and restrain and speak with careful, calculated, concise statements, compassionate words that are constructive, that build up. That's another thing about our culture today. We seem determined that when we speak, it's got to be something that's often going to be beneficial to me, which means that if I'm going to make me look better than you, then I've got to kind of tear you down, and then I got to build me up. And that's in such contradiction to what God's word says regarding how we're to love one another, how we're to interact with one another. So I want to honor this text today by saying this. Let's practice today the principle of listening more, speaking less, and certainly not allowing our emotions to drive us. Because what I see in all of this is that when the emotions drive, then we're going to say more than we need to say. We're not going to listen nearly close enough to what we need to hear. And we're going to allow ourselves to be driven by anger and frustration and hormones, basically, which very rarely provide a productive, constructive end result. And we want something that's positive. We want something that's Christ honoring and righteous. Well, friends, I pray your week is going well. This might be the principle that changes the whole dynamic. So take it to heart, put it into practice, and let's go out that door living sent